Okay, good morning, everyone. Once again, this is Paris Prokopis. I'm an account manager here at MIG. Welcome to our Dynamics GP EFT Transfer and E-Banking webinar. Next slide, please. Before we begin, we have a couple housekeeping items here. You can choose the mic and speakers on your computer if you wish to watch the webinar on voice over IP. Otherwise, you can choose telephone and you dial in using the information provided. And when you have questions throughout the presentation, you can submit questions via the questions panel. We will have Q&A after the presentation, so please feel free to ask whatever questions you need to ask. Now, a little bit about us. MIG specializes in the implementation of financial and business management systems. We work on helping our customers streamline their processes and maximize their productivity. The solutions that we work with are Microsoft Dynamics GP, SL, CRM. We also work with Microsoft SharePoint and Business Intelligence. We have well over 15 years now of business experience, and our customers range anywhere from mid-market all the way to high-level enterprise-level customers. And just a quick agenda. Just told you a little bit about us. Our slide was out of place. I apologize for that. We're going to have an introduction to electronic fund transfer and e-banking. We're going to show you how to reduce administrative expenses, increase productivity, improve cash management, and increase financial security. And then we're going to do a live demo and show everything in action. And then finally, we will close with a question and answer period where you can definitely get some of your questions answered. You can ask the questions throughout the presentation, though. Just a reminder. Now, MIG has several certifications. We're a Microsoft Gold certified partner. We're recognized by Microsoft Business Solutions as a premier ERP vendor in VAR. We've been with Microsoft for many, many years. That's all we work with. We are BBB accredited. We're also a GSA approved vendor, and our webinars can be taken for CPE credit. Go ahead and skip to the next slide. That's a repeat. And thank you. And now I'm going to, without further ado, I will have Jackie take over, and she'll go forward with the presentation. Jackie, take it away.
Welcome to our webinar. The topic is going to be all about e-banking. My name is Jackie Pride, and I will be your host today. I'm a Microsoft certified trainer, for those of you who don't know me, with 16 years experience working exclusively with Dynamics GP. Of all the modules, none, in my opinion, are as underutilized as the e-banking suite of products. I've had a number of large clients in the past who were cutting edge in nearly everything they did, but when questioned about things as simple as EFT payments or bank reconciliation, they would reply, "We'll get to it. We have bigger things at the moment," or higher priority things. "We'll get around to it when we get a chance." And I've never understood that. To my way of thinking, there is a lot to be said for the efficient reconciliation of cash, one of your most important assets, and especially the safeguarding of it. I can't imagine anything higher priority than making sure you reconcile on a regular basis and that you are safeguarding your cash assets. So let's talk a little bit about e-banking and what it does. So what exactly is the suite of products? Well, they are modules that automate all of your banking activity, such as vendor payments. It's a means of interacting with your bank that is safer than mailing or receiving checks. For example, you know, we hear every day in the news things about mail fraud. So obviously, anytime we can electronically upload something with our bank via a safe connection with them, that's always going to be a lot safer. So e-banking is a catch-all name for multiple bank-related products, which we will see and discuss in detail in just a second. So what are the benefits of e-banking? Well, why should we think about it? It helps us to manage our financials more effectively. So the automation of vital banking activities and electronic interaction with your bank, we just talked about that, will help not only safeguard but reduce errors by streamlining your manual data entry and determining things like clear checks each month and cash application for customers' invoices. We can reduce administrative expenses, obviously, if we're doing things electronically. We're not doing them via paper. So if we're sending payments, we're not paying for expensive check stock. And we're possibly, if we decide to email remittances to our vendors, we're also not incurring the cost of postage to mail those. So by moving those routine accounting tasks online and automatically applying bank transactions directly to customers, to vendors, you eliminate that paper waste and the repetitive manual data entry. And who likes to do that? I certainly don't. Especially important these days when so many companies are shorthanded and employees often wear multiple hats. Some of you in the audience perhaps wear multiple hats as well. So anytime that we can speed up that process or automate as much as we can, it just helps us in the long run. Anytime we streamline our accounting processes with those electronic reconciliations, that also leads to improved funds availability. Line item control, so we know, for example, with SafePay, we know that the bank is not going to clear a check that was not part of the list that we gave to them that can be processed for payment. So these are intelligent adaptations to your bank processes that will help you increase your financial security, maybe help you sleep a little bit better at night. So we've got that increased protection through check comparison, excuse me, easy exception handling if you're doing lockboxes perhaps. And last but not least, access to decision driving information. So we would be able to apply transactions to accounts when they occur rather than waiting days or weeks to maybe apply cash, maybe to reconcile our checking account. The sooner we do it, the faster we can make those decisions, and it allows us to work smarter and faster, and we all could use with some of that, right? That is always a good thing. So what makes up the electronic banking features? What is part of that e-banking suite that I've been talking about? Well, we have a number of different module areas. So some of you may be familiar with at least some of these features, but I still run across a surprising number of users who have no idea that some of these exist or is something available to them. I have, sometimes they just have no idea why they aren't even using them, that they know that it's there, they don't know why, it wasn't part of the initial implementation. So let's review together and make sure that we all know what is available to us. Dynamics GP has an application, obviously many applications, but we're going to talk about one that is already installed and turned on that uses the checks that you run for both accounts payable and payroll, the deposits that you create from customer cash receipts in AR, as well as any banking activities such as transfers between accounts, miscellaneous checks, and pulls all of this together to present a picture of your monthly banking activity for you to reconcile. Some of you may be utilizing that feature. If you haven't used this module in the past, there is even a functionality built in, if you've been on GP for a number of years, to clear any unused cash receipts from past years in the deposit screen so you can play catch up. Now, I worked with a client a number of years ago that was using GP and had been using GP for 10 years before they decided to finally use the bank reconciliation module. So they approached me and they said, hey, remember when you said that there was some way we could clear those unused cash receipts when we were ready to start the bank reconciliation? they had a lot of unused cash receipts. I have to admit, I held my breath a little bit when I cleared that many cash receipts at one time. I wasn't anticipating that they would wait 10 years to start that process, but it worked beautifully, and they were able to get started with the reconciliation. So don't feel like if you haven't used it in the past that, oh, it'll just be too hard to get going on it. It's really not. They've built in some things to make it very simple for you. So that's bank reconciliation. You may have seen that under the financial transaction screen. And a companion to that, we also have the ability to import a text file from the bank to automatically clear deposits and checks for us. So if you are using bank reconciliation, you know that when you go into it, you check mark the checks and the deposits and all the activity that have cleared for that time period so that it comes up with the outstanding checks, outstanding deposits, and reconciles. If so, you may say, well, I like the idea of using the reconciliation, but it's just a lot of work to check mark all of that. The reconciliation application, say that 10 times fast, works to clear all of those transactions and is very, very easy to use when you consider automating that more tedious aspect of it, of the clearing. Other features include the ability to pay vendors via ACH, which GP refers to as EFT payments. So some of you out there might call this ACH. In GP, we refer to it as EFT, or electronic fund transfers. And we have it for both payables and for receivables. It works in the same fashion. We set the vendor or the customer up with their banking information. We turn that process on, and in the case of payables, we can pay the vendors, and it will go to the account specified in their setups. In the case of customers, we can process invoices, and it will draw against the account that we've specified for payment against those invoices. My experience has been that EFT, there are a lot more people using the payables management than the receivables management. I think people just feel more comfortable paying people and sending money than people feel comfortable letting somebody pull money. Another feature we have is Lockbox Processing, which allows us, and some people might be using lockboxes from their banks today, and they might be getting some kind of manual list from the bank that says, here's what you got today in the lockbox in terms of deposits from customers. If you do, Lockbox in GP will allow you to receive that file from the bank, denoting the customers who have paid via the bank's Lockbox service, and typically that includes their customer information, ID, name, the amount, invoice numbers applied for the cash, and then we use that information, we upload it to create that cash receipt in GP. Very big time saver if you have a lot of, especially if you have a lot of small payments from customers. And last but certainly not least, we have SafePay, which banks often refer to as positive pay. And this is a mechanism for us to report to the bank any checks that we write along with the date, the amount, the payee, and the check number. And the bank will then refuse to process any check that's not on that official list, reducing check fraud. Years ago, a client of mine was a victim of check fraud, and this was before I really knew anything about positive pay or safe pay. They had sent a check to a foreign country, and unbeknownst to them, the check was intercepted in the mail service of that country, the amount removed, replaced with a larger sum, surprise, surprise, and a different payee. And it was presented to the bank in that country. The fraud was so well executed that it was nearly impossible to tell that it was not a real check from their company. So they found the discrepancy during their monthly bank reconciliation nearly a month later. Then they started the process with the bank of, going to them and saying, hey, this was a fraud perpetrated against us. Shortly after that, of course, their bank recommended implementing positive pay, so we implemented safe pay for them. So here's a large list of functions you may or may not be using or perhaps may not even be aware of. So let's take a deeper look at each one of these. So let's focus a bit, and we'll start with the electronic bank reconciliation, which is, as you probably know, every checkbook in your Dynamics GP system has the ability to be reconciled individually. We use this feature to reconcile the general ledger cash with the bank cash account to make sure that it ties to the bank statement. This feature uses basic reconciliation format that we accountants all know and love. Well, sometimes we love. It provides for a way to enter adjustments, such as interest earned or service charges, as well as increase or decrease adjustments as needed. So if there was a wire that came in or something that wasn't recognized in GP, you can enter that information in so that your bank reconciliation reflects everything. And that's great from an audit perspective. Also, from an audit perspective, we have the ability to print reports. For example, a list of outstanding checks or a list of transactions that cleared the bank that month. The reconciliation information, another crazy rhyming phrase, is stored within the CM tables, CM being an abbreviation for cash management for those of you who are familiar with the GP tables. That reconciliation number is stored in there, and then you can easily run queries across that information later using SmartList or SQL Query if you're an IT geared person. The reconciliation process allows users to match newly entered transactions with transactions in the holding account or those posted to the General Ledger Bank cash account. And then, as we mentioned, if there are other transactions, we can manually enter those. And of course, payments to vendors, cash receipts from customers, bank transactions are already included. So if you are using AP, if you're using payroll, the checks that you cut each week, each 2-week period, however often, is captured in those CM tables and then presented to the bank reconciliation. So marking items as cleared is as simple as a check mark, and we can select, of course, a range of checks to clear, because a lot of times during the month when we're reconciling at month end, the checks at the beginning of the month, nearly all of those may have cleared. So we can choose a big range and then uncheck mark the ones that maybe didn't clear out of that bunch. It just speeds things up a bit. So the difference in our reconcile balance and the book balance at the cutoff date is presented on the screen, so we can easily see the amount that we're trying to work towards that is different, and what we're trying to discover the discrepancies for. And that brings us to the electronic bank reconciliation, or EREC, as sometimes we abbreviate it. And this speeds up that reconciliation process, again, by automating the reconciliation of transactions and adjustments with downloaded bank data using tools that work with any bank that supports automatic reconciliation. As an FYI, I haven't met a bank yet that didn't. I'm sure there are some that don't support it, but they're typically not the mainstream banks. It also helps you to manage exceptions for transactions that aren't in your records. So I highly encourage you to take advantage of the electronic account information that integrates with the bank reconciliation module of Dynamics GP if you haven't already, especially if you have large amounts of transactions each month and you're looking for ways to save valuable time. Remember, there are some things that the computer can do and do it faster, and you should always make an effort to enable it to do that. Save your valuable time for analysis, which really is a better use of your efforts. You can also download the banking transactions over the internet to view and audit later. You don't have to immediately integrate those. In the last 5 years, I would say, I've seen a steady increase in the number of my clients who are implementing EFT for payables. I think that is probably due to the fact that we now allow the emailing of remittances and because of that, it's kind of more beneficial to send payments electronically when we can also send the remittances electronically. I don't know, or maybe people are just embracing that a little bit more. This is a means of securely transferring payments by transmitting your payables to the bank after you've processed them. So part of the EFT process is we generate this text file and we upload that to the bank, and it includes information about the payee and the check and their account number and the things that we have stored for them. We're going to take a look at that during the demo. That's transmitted to the bank, everything they need to make that payment. Nothing goes in the mail. It's much safer. Banks have secure access.
Hi, Jackie. We're not able to hear you again.
So I apologize. Can everybody hear me now?
Yes.
Awesome. She's going to get a really long message from me, I think. So anyway, the EFT for payables allows us to process using ACH formats. So Dynamics GP uses the Nacha format, and the Nacha format is just a common format that many of the banks use. So if your bank uses the Nacha format, you won't have to do anything in GP other than just point to the Nacha format, and the file specs will automatically match up to what your bank requires. Really a good process. So with the standards for support with the ACH, we allow the EFT files to be processed rather quickly and set up rather quickly, I should say, for processing. And enhancements have been made to allow you to further define that EFT file if you need to. Just depends on whether or not your bank requires a special format. So as long as there's flexibility in the system, you can pretty much work with any bank and get those EFT payments out. Now that GP has email capabilities, in addition, as I mentioned before, we have the ability to electronically send the payment and electronically send the remittances as well. So you can EFT payments and then send those remittances, and both the payment and the paper support can be electronic, so much better than paying for specialty check forms. I know those are rather expensive, and so much better than paying for ink and paper, and let alone postage for emailing, or I'm sorry, if you were to send remittances in the mail. So much, much better. And EFT for receivables, again, as I mentioned, not as well received or as used. With the EFTs for payables, but we do have that capability. It works exactly the same way as the vendor EFTs, only in reverse. We're actually getting money electronically as opposed to sending money electronically. When we go through the demo part, I will show you how to handle the EFTs for payables and how we set those up for the vendors. And just keep in mind, I won't go through it for customers. It's the exact same process. It's just a customer file instead of a vendor file. EFTs conform to not only U.S. bank industry EFT standards, but also most Canadian formats, including Royal Bank of Canada and Bank of Montreal, and I think there's an Imperial Bank of Commerce or something like that. So we support all of those formats. We also have Lockbox Processing. We also have Lockbox Processing that allows us to easily process and match transactions from the Lockbox file and automatically import and apply those payments from the bank to our open accounts. So we can set those up. We can also support multiple Lockbox profiles and reuse them with the mapping of key fields from the Lockbox to accounts receivable. So that's kind of an overview of the Lockbox feature. And then that brings us to SafePay. And the SafePay module adds the positive pay functionality to GP, which includes the exporting of checks for comparison by the bank when those checks are presented for payment. And generally, these files are quite simple, and they're just a list, a big text file of payees and check numbers and amounts and dates. So let's take a look at some of these in action. So I'm going to exit out of this portion of the presentation, and I'm going to go to Dynamics GP. So you should see Dynamics GP on your screen right now. And this is, for those of you who might be on an older version, this is GP 2015 R2. So some of the screens may look slightly different to you. Don't be concerned. I'd like to start off by showing you the bank reconciliation. So under Dynamics GP on the Financial tab, you will see under Transactions a bunch of banking activities. And again, these are ways of entering manual type activities. And then we have the Reconcile bank statement. And the Reconcile bank statement allows us to pick any of our checkbooks. So if you have 20 checkbooks, each of those can be reconciled individually. I'm going to pick my old standby. Uptown Trust usually has a goodly amount of transactions in it. And you'll see that when you choose one, and I had this one already set up, but when you go to Reconcile, you'll be prompted to enter the ending balance from the bank statement and the cutoff date for the bank statement. And then last but not least, just like we do with a regular manual using Excel reconciliation, we would choose our cutoff for transactions in Dynamics GP. Then we click Transactions, and it asks if we want to use a grace period for this, and I'm going to say yes. And you can see it's going through rather quickly and pulling transactions. And the screen that displays shows me different types of transactions. So DEP would be a deposit and the deposit number, and CHK would be a check and the check number, and it has date information, and if it's a payment, it shows in the payment column, deposits in the deposit column. Now as I check mark things, if you notice down in the bottom, we have the number of payments and deposits that we have cleared and the total amount. Why do we do that? Because often on the bank statement, it shows that. So we're trying to tie to the bank statement. So as I check mark, you'll see that bump up to 5 deposits and the total amount. So I can use that as a quick reference and know if I'm off or missing something. Over here on the right-hand side, it shows my adjusted bank balance, the adjusted book balance coming out of GP, and the difference between. So if you remember, I mentioned that that difference is something that we are looking to get to 0 before we reconcile. And speaking of that, once we get down to a number, it may come to our attention that we're off by interest we earned on that account. We may be off by a service charge or a wire that came through, something outside of Dynamics GP. And if that's the case, we have an adjustments button, and we can click on that, and we can drop down the type of transaction. So interest and service charges are very common. And then we also have other income and other expenses. We choose a date, a GL account we want that to go to, and the checkbook amount for it. You'll notice that it's just a one-sided account. We don't have an offset for that. That's because the offset will always be to the cash account associated with this checkbook ID, and that's by design. We obviously don't want to post something to the wrong account, so we make it easy and we pull it automatically, and the stored procedures that run this when we post will make sure that it goes to the right cash account. So we can do all of our adjustments here and watch that difference as we go through. When we are marking a lot of cleared transactions, we have the ability to select one of the line items. You'll see little arrows, and we can say begin my range here, and then I can scroll way down, maybe 2 weeks worth, 3 weeks worth, and say end the range here, and then come back and say mark or unmark or clear transactions within that particular range, and that helps me do a large block of them. And then last but not least, I can alter this display, and I can look at marked or unmarked transactions only. Right now I'm looking at everything, or I could sort it by date instead of the type. So right now I think I'm having it sort by deposits first and then my checks. When I am finished, I'll click the Reconcile button, and I'm finished for that month. Now, if I'm still working on it, though, I'm just going to click OK, and I'll come back to here and say Save. And then I can pick it up like I did earlier during this demo with where I left off. So that's a little bit about the bank reconciliation. And I'd like to talk next about the electronic reconcile and how that works. And you've probably seen or maybe noticed that under routines for financial, there is an option for electronic reconcile. Now, for most of the e-banking series, we have a very similar setup where we have a configuration file, we have some sort of download maintenance and history, and a transaction download section. So if I pop open SafePay, which we'll talk about in a few minutes here, you'll see the same kind of configuration for both of those. Makes it a little bit easier if you want to embrace more than one of the e-banking series. You'll see some similarities as you do that. So for electronic reconcile under the configurator, and I have a sample one here for Chase. And you can see that we support a number of different file formats. So this one, I choose the BAI file format, and it's a comma delimited file. So the bank will tell you these things. When you go to the bank or talk to your representative, you can ask, hey, do you offer this service? How much is it? Can I get to it from my Chase access or whatever my account structure is? They will help you with that, and they will let you know what that file format is and the type of file that they will be providing to you. And then you just let GP know it, and then they take care of all these details, and they'll mark where particular fields are and the format of those fields. So setting this up is quite easy. One of the things that I really like about this is that I have the ability to import and export this file format. So if you're somebody who's in a multi-company environment and you use Chase, maybe you have multiple checking accounts, but you use Chase across the board, once you set this up once, you can export it and then go to the other companies and import that format. You don't have, if you have 12 companies, you do not have to do this 12 times. You can just export it and import it, and it's done for you. Once it's configured, you'll go to the download maintenance and provide some additional information for that Chase account. And that is what checkbooks are tied to that particular format, and the path or the file name for that file. So obviously you're going to download from the bank those transactions. You'll want to upload them into GP after it's done. We specify where GP should look for that file to be. So that's all this does. That's just your download maintenance for each of your checkbooks. Once that's done, we can go to the transaction download section, and we'll choose our format. Again, you can have as many formats as you have banks, and whichever checkbook has been downloaded. I don't have one currently in that location, but it would show, and then I would highlight that and say download. And then that information is going to replicate itself through the reconciliation module. Once I've done that multiple times, I have summary and transactional history that I can go back and look at. So I have the ability to look at all my checkbooks, the transaction number, check count, deposit, and so on. And again, confirmation numbers, and that helps me with my reconciliation process. So that's how electronic reconcile is set up. You can just see, pop that open, choose configurator, whatever format the bank tells you, pop that in there, and specify a location where that file is going to be saved. Next up, I would like to talk about EFTs for payables. And while we are still on the financial screen, and of course payables, it's going to be under purchasing, but everything starts with a checkbook. And in order to use EFTs for payables, we're going to go to the checkbook. And again, I'm going to choose my Chase account. And you'll notice that on the screen, and you may have seen this in the past, there's a button for EFT. There's also a button for direct deposit. So if you're using payroll, direct deposit is set up in a similar fashion. So for EFTs, when I click on that, there's really, in my experience, most of the time the banks provide you with 4 key pieces of information that you need to provide to the EFT checkbook screen, and that is the bank or country of origin. So if you're a Canadian company, you would choose Canada. If you're an operating, if you operate in the U.S. and your bank or your checkbook is a U.S. checkbook, that's the bank or region that you would use. Your transit routing number and your bank account number. Obviously, this is how banks move money around. So the transit routing number represents your account, the bank's signature, if you will. So that's their 9-digit identifier. And then this is your checkbook's identifier within the bank. This is letting the system know when you do an EFT where to pull the money from to pay to the vendor, or in the case of EFTs for receivables, where to deposit the money to. So this is our half of the transaction. This is our part of the handshake. We also need to know the currency code. What type of currency will this transaction be in for this checkbook? So you may have multiple checkbooks, you may have multiple currencies. The bank may give you some additional information like service class codes, blocking factor, but again, my experience has been there's really just 4 primary pieces of information: the country or region, obviously the router and the account number, and the currency code. Once this is set up, then depending on whether we're doing receivables or payables, we're going to click down here, and we have a few selections as far as, do we use EFT numbers or do we continue to use check numbers? So we can use just the same sequence of check numbers. I prefer to do EFT numbers. It makes it stand out a little bit better, but if you prefer to have the same number consistently, that's fine as well. GP will accommodate. Your bank will let you know whether or not pre-notes are required, and if so, you're going to check mark this. Now, lately, it seems like pre-notes have not been required as much as they were in the past, and a pre-note is nothing more than a test transaction. So the bank will let you know whether or not you need to check mark that. We also specify that file format. So remember, when we set up a particular format to be used or a configuration, we're going to point to that. And I will show you that in just a second, where the EFT format resides for EFT payables. And last but not least, we specify where domestic payments, foreign payments, and pre-notes will be generated to. So when I generate a file of EFT payments, this is the path and the file name where those will be stored. So I'm going to click OK for those and save my information and close out of here. Now, under my financial cards, we've been looking at the checkbook, but if I scroll down just a little bit before fixed assets, you will see the EFT file format. And the EFT file format looks something like this. And it has a number of transaction line types. So there may be file headers, there may be detail lines, there may be trailer records with some totals. The bank will let you know what format they require. Now, typically banks will follow NOTCHA formats, which is simply the North American, or the Automated Clearing, Commerce Clearinghouse Association's standards. So it's the standards that they've come up with. And typically most banks are going to follow that. So if that's the case, you'll choose that format and all this will be done for you. The banks may have a identifier or something like that they want you to hard code into it. And if that's the case, we can set up constants and you can put that identifier in. So we set up this format, and again, the bank will tell you what that should be or provide a format to you. Very easy to do yourself. If you'd rather not, of course, you can ask somebody at MIG to set that up for you. We'd be happy to do that. So we get those set up on the financial side and we're ready to go. Now we have to determine which vendors are going to be doing nice. So anyway, on the purchasing side, under our vendors, we are going to specify all right. So now you should be able to hear me again. I apologize for that.
Yes, we.
Can everybody hear me now? Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, awesome. Thanks.
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
Yay. Always a good thing. So back to our vendor maintenance. After we have determined that certain vendors are going to be paid via EFT, we're simply going to go into their vendor master records that we should have set up already in Dynamics GP, and we are going to specify their particular EFT information. So in the case of vendors, the way that we do that is we go to their address records. And on the address records, we have a notation here at the bottom, a button that we can push for EFT banks. Now when I check mark that, or when I click on that and put information in here, it will automatically activate that for EFTs. If for some reason I don't want that to be active, I can mark it as inactive, and then they will get a paper check instead of an EFT payment. But just like for our checkbook, there's just a handful of records that have to be specified. Again, the bank or country code associated with that vendor's bank. So you may make a payment to Canada for a Canadian vendor even though you're in US, and you would specify that they were, their country of origin was Canadian. Transit routing number and bank account number, again, just like for us. The account type, whether it's a checking or a savings account, we mark that, and the currency ID. So again, kind of the same basic 4 pieces of information we set up for our vendors. And once we do that, once we set it up for them, we're ready to go for payments. During our AP check run, under transactions, when we are doing our check run for a particular vendor, When we do our select checks and we look at a particular batch ID, and let's just choose one of these and drill into that batch so you can see what I'm talking about. For accounts payable, when we do check batches, we have an additional field here that says payment method, either check or EFT, one or the other. So when we're creating a batch, we specify at that point in time that we want to process EFTs, and it will pull in those vendors that get EFTs, unless, of course, we do some kind of selection criteria on our batch beforehand. So we do our check run just like we would normally, but after we post, in the case of EFTs, we would process our remittances. So we would process a remittance instead of a check. And last but not least, we would generate that EFT file that would be uploaded to the bank. So for Chase, here is a computer check run out there. I would check mark that. And I may have multiples. If I do 4 or 5 check runs in a day, I could upload all of that information that night for payment. So I can accumulate those. And then I would simply say generate EFT file. And it would look at that configuration file and determine where to place that. And then I would take my little fob and go out to Chase Access or whatever, put in my secret code for the day, and upload that file. And then basically I'm done at that point. The bank may require like a second person to release the file depending on how your security setups are. But for the most part, in terms of GP processing, you're done at that point. I would also like to take a look at SafePay. So I'd like everybody to have an opportunity to see SafePay. So if I go back to financial, you probably noticed this when we talked about the electronic reconcile. Under SafePay, we also have a configuration and transaction uploads. The only difference with the SafePay compared to any of the other bank formats is it's typically a lot smaller format. So when I have these records out here, they typically just have one line of information for each of my checks, and it's a detail line. You can see in this particular one, it has a transmission type, it has an account number, check amount, check date, and so on. So, and typically the payee's name. When we do a check run in accounts payable, when we're finished, we can create these SafePay configurations so we can upload those transactions. So we would simply look at our bank and we would see what checkbooks out there have AP check runs that we have not uploaded. And again, we would mark those just like we saw with the EFT processing and click the upload. And it would take all of those check runs, submit it to the bank. Very important if you're doing SafePay and if you work with your bank to do SafePay, make sure that you do that on a timely basis so that if they're getting especially an EFT and it gets there rather quickly, or their check gets there rather quickly, they don't try to cash that check, and there's no SafePay file that says it's okay for them to do that. So just make sure that you're fairly timely with getting those uploaded to the bank. So that's a little bit of the e-banking module and some of the capabilities of it. I apologize for the technical difficulties with the phone this morning. Kind of feels like a Monday, even though it's a Thursday. I would like to open it up to questions. If anybody has questions at this time, I'd be happy to answer those. And I hope that you saw some things today that make you want to embrace one or more of the e-banking options. I think that would be great. I think you would really appreciate it after you get it set up. Really makes your life a lot easier.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jackie. Thank you very much. As mentioned before, you can enter any questions into the question and answers panel, and we will answer any questions for you. Jackie, if you can put the PowerPoint back up, that'd be great. And then as far as, we'll just give it a minute here, see if what questions pop up, and then go from there. Okay, looks like a couple are popping up here.
I'm sure you guys have plenty of questions because it's very much an overview of those applications.
Okay, one asks if you can use EFTs with multi-currency.
Yes, you can, and you saw that currency field there. So no matter what currencies you're using with Dynamics GP, you can use those with EFTs as well.
Okay. Another question here. My bank uses a BAI format. Is that supported?
It is. The Banking Administration Institute is a very common format, and Dynamics GP supports that one. It also supports custom free-form ones as well, but definitely BAI, that's a very common one.
Okay. And was asking, does Eft work with Canadian banks?
It does. There are a number of Canadian banks that have formats already built into GP. So if you remember when we were talking previously, like the Royal Bank of Toronto and some of those are already built and supported. If you're using a Canadian bank that's not on that list, sometimes they use the same format as one of the others. And if not, if they have their own, you can certainly write your own custom one. They're quite easy to do. I'm not a programmer. I've done plenty of them. Very easy to do.
Okay. All right. Just give it a moment here in case any other questions pop up. And in the meantime, I'll just talk about MIG support plans. We have the slide up there. MIG offers various support plans to meet your specific business needs. There's different levels. Some of them also include training and some other options in there. There are fixed rate plans for the year. We not only support the Dynamics products, but also any of the ISV add-ons or any third-party programs that come through. So okay, it looks like there aren't any more questions. So, and as I mentioned before here, MIG does offer various training plans. Are all live web training, and we have different options. Some of the plans are included with the support contract. Otherwise, you can pay, hourly if you want to have like 5 hours of training on GP 101 or whatever you wanted to do. So, or if you wanted to get training on what Jackie just showed you, that's the type of thing we can do for you. Just contact us at info@mig.com. At the end of this webinar, we will have a short survey. It's obviously designed to help us evaluate and improve our webinars. And if you could take a few moments to provide us with your feedback, that would be greatly appreciated. And once again, we want to thank you for joining us. We apologize for any of the technical issues we were having there back and forth. Jackie, next slide, please.
Sure.
And then we just want to say thank you for attending, and if you have any questions, be sure to email us at info@mig.com, or if you'd like to see further demo or inquire about other products and services that we offer. And you can also look at our website. We have www.mig.com. We also have various other webinars that we have done already posted on the website for your convenience as well. And this one will be on there in a few days as well. Thank you very much for joining